Writing the physical appearance of your character can be really tricky. How much do you show us? What is important to show us? What does the reader want to see? And what can you leave out completely? We're going to answer these questions and a few more using my 5-point character framework. And at the end of this video, I'm going to edit a character description on screen so you can really dive into that thought process with me. Here are the chapters for this video. If you can't stick around for the full video, please feel free to skip ahead to whatever you need. I don't want to waste your time today. I want you to take the information that you need from this video. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a short story writer with a bachelor's degree in creative writing, and I was at one point right where you are now. I was looking for ways to grow my craft as a writer, was looking for my voice and my style, and trying to figure out this crazy art that I was so passionate about. But now I'm teaching you what I've spent years learning so that you don't have to fumble through it all and then end up sitting through 4 years of school and going into student debt just to be able to write a decent story. Okay, let's get into it. Character appearance, as it sounds, is showing your readers what the character looks like. Easy enough, right? Well, there are some nuances to writing good character descriptions, so I want to start with a few things for you to keep in mind throughout this video. When we talk about character descriptions, we should also be talking about what the reader wants to know, what they need to know, what they don't, and then what really matters to your story. As you'll see as we go through these chapters, character descriptions are really just vague sketches of your character. You're not going to give your readers every single detail about your character because, one, that would be really cumbersome and overwhelming to read, and two, you want to use every single word on the page intentionally. You don't want to give your readers a bunch of fluff or filler that's going to slow down your story and potentially bore your readers. So the first thing we need to think about is what's important about character descriptions. So we need to think about what parts of character descriptions actually matter to a story. Your story is not going to change whether or not your character has blue eyes or brown eyes, but something that's stigmatized or something that causes oppression like skin color, weight, disability, gender, those kinds of things can really impact how your character moves through a world. And it also impacts how your reader is going to have first impressions of that character because of their own biases. And it'll impact how the world around your character treats them. So the very first thing I want you to do is to think about those important details that actually matter to a reader, to the story. And once you have some idea of what those important details are, we're going to need to think about the 2 key guidelines to stick to when writing character descriptions. So the first one is to sprinkle the character description in with the action of your story. Have you ever read a story where the author has laid out that this character has brown eyes, curly hair, lots of freckles, is really tall and slim, and has small feet? They just go off in this big paragraph and they give you all of these pieces to put together like a puzzle in your mind. The momentum of the story has stopped or not even started yet, and we're stuck at this speed bump of exposition. We have to pump the brakes and wade through this self-gratifying character description from this author. That's pretty annoying, and my guess is that your eyes start to kind of glaze over and move through all of this to get to where the action starts. Or you just put the book down altogether. To avoid your reader's eyes glazing over, it's better to sprinkle that in some action so the story is still moving as we get these pieces of information. If your character has to get dressed, you can show us some of their physical appearance as they're focusing on it. If your character does their makeup, maybe that's when we see their blue eyes or their brown eyes or whatever color they might be. While your character is walking through a forest, do they ever have to duck under tree branches? Because that could show us how tall they are or aren't. There are really slick ways to weave in that physical appearance with what they're doing. And my second main point here is less is more. This might be a controversial opinion, but I really like to trim down my character descriptions to the bare bones. Sometimes my character descriptions are as basic as adult woman. Okay, not blatantly stated like that, but through the subtext. From the very first mention of a character, your reader instantly has an idea of what they look like. You can use the word she and no other descriptors, and your reader already has an idea of what this person looks like. They're already picturing a woman or a young girl because of that pronoun she. So the more that you describe, the more mental gymnastics your reader has to do to go from their initial picture to what you're describing. When we read a story, we want to zone in, and the last thing that we want is to be pulled out of that story to have to stop and rethink what this character looks like. And remember, only give them what's important, only what matters to the story itself. If you need to show your reader something like the skin color, weight, disability, anything along those lines that might determine how your character moves through the world, you want to do that as early on as you can so that your reader can start to get that point of view and kind of start to understand what the character might be going through or thinking about, or what their perspective on the world might look like. I also want to talk a bit about how to describe your characters based on who your narrator is. If you're writing a story in first person, then the way that your readers see this world is going to be filtered through that character's eyes through a lens of their own. So anytime that you're describing characters, we're seeing them as your main character would see them. If your character is a really detail-oriented person, we might see some more of those finer details of somebody's appearance. Maybe the narrator sees somebody across the room pick up a pencil and notices that the button on their flannel sleeve is undone, or they see a scar on the hand. But if your character is more self-centered or just kind of oblivious in general, they might not notice those details. They might only notice how tall somebody is or their hair color, some of those more obvious points to a person's appearance. The way that your main character describes themselves is really important as well. Again, depending on how detail-oriented your character is, we'll see more or less of those finer points. But even though we can be our harshest critics on our appearance, we don't think about our appearance in such specific detail. I don't look in the mirror and think, oh, my blue eyes look so big today. I might think, oh, my eye looks kind of red and it's a little bit dry today, because that's something that would be out of the normal for me. But I've lived 25 years with blue eyes, so I don't notice my blue eyes every single day. Instead, I might point out how a certain pair of pants makes me look or how a new hairstyle might make me feel, but I'm not looking in the mirror and thinking, oh, my 5'6" height and my blue eyes look so great today, or oh, I wish I was taller than 5'6". You know, like those kinds of things don't come up so specifically. If you do want to show those kinds of things about your first person narrator, you can do so with the dialogue of other characters or things that they overhear, or maybe they discover something new about themselves. Maybe they learn that they're actually 5'6" and not 5'5", something along those lines. Maybe someone says to your character, "You're blushing," after something embarrassing happens. Or maybe someone comes up and compliments the big brown eyes. If you write your story in third person, you're not describing things from the point of view of a character necessarily, but there is still a lens on your story that you need to be consistent with in your character descriptions. Your narrator still has a personality and an objective, even if they aren't a character in your story, and even if the reader never explicitly knows what that is. But the voice and style that you use in your narration needs to stay consistent throughout your story, no matter what point of view you're writing in. That being said, you can choose whatever style of character descriptions you'd like to, whether you want to be a little bit more detail heavy or less detailed, but it needs to stay consistent from character to character. So if your narrator really hones in on the details of one of your characters, you need to bring that same energy to the next character description. Or you need to have a really good reason not to. Otherwise, that imbalance of descriptions might feel a little bit funny to your reader. So before we get into editing that character description together, I want to give you my best tip on writing character appearance. And that is to use your character appearance to show the personality of your character. I believe that this is the most seamless way to weave in that character appearance and those character descriptions into your story. But the question is, how do you do that? Say that you want to show us that your character has really long hair. Maybe you write that her long hair sways behind her as she walks. That not only shows the hair, but it implies that she has a pep in her step. To really get your hair to sway behind you like that, you either have to be moving quickly or have a little bit of a bounce in your step. So that description shows us the length of the hair, but it also shows us that she moves quickly or she's a little bit peppy, whatever that might mean to you. If you wanted to talk about rosy cheeks and freckles, you could tell us that her face flushed so much that the red covered up her freckles. That shows us the embarrassment that she's feeling, maybe any shame that she might be feeling. It shows us how pale her skin is, it tells us she has freckles, and it shows us that her face can get really, really red. And that's all in one sentence. So that shows us not only a few things about the way that she looks and about her personality, but it's very concise and uses very few words to do all of that. So I want you to use this tactic to weave your character descriptions into your story in a way that shows your characters on a deeper level than just that surface level of here's what I look like. Okay, let's use all of these new tools for writing character descriptions and put them into practice together. Okay, let's go over this description and how I would take it to be either nice and short and sweet or a longer one that has a little bit more detail to it. So this one says, Amelia has brown eyes and hair to match. Her dark circles under her eyes are always showing even through layers of makeup. Her skin is tan and has olive undertones, which makes her the envy of all of her pale friends, especially in the winter. Her full lips are nude tone, but she always paints them brown with lipstick. Her hair falls to the small of her back and she never wears it up. The accent she brought over from Greece makes her stand out like a sore thumb among her friends here in Wisconsin. And not to mention her height, she hates being so tall. So the first thing I'll do here is pull out those aspects that I think are important to know that the reader might need to know for the story to go on. So we know she's a girl or a woman. We don't necessarily know her age here. She's from Greece. She now lives in Wisconsin. And she has an accent. And we can be more specific and say she has a Greek accent here. So I pulled out these descriptors because it's important for us to know that she's a woman, because Women see the world differently than men do or than non-binary people do. The world sees us differently than other types of genders as well. So it's important to know the gender of your character so we can kind of get an idea of what they're dealing with. She's from Greece but now lives in Wisconsin. I think that's really important to know about your character, being from halfway across the world in a completely different environment now. And then she has a Greek accent. And I pulled that one out specifically because I think that that's going to be a defining feature of Amelia. She's very much aware that her accent is different than her friends and that it stands out where she is. So if I were going to write this in a shorter version, kind of a quick little description of Amelia, I'm going to just stick to those 4 aspects. So that might look something like... So the shorter version now reads, Amelia just moved here from Greece last year. She's still getting accustomed to the cold winters. Her classmates love her accent, but she is learning to speak like her peers every day. The accent makes her feel too different, so she's paying close attention to how her friends say their vowels and what shape their mouths make as they speak. So we get that she's a girl. We understand now that maybe she's a little bit younger because she has classmates in there. So maybe she's an elementary school, middle school, teenager. We don't really know yet, but we know that she's young enough to have those insecurities about where she's from and young enough to be comparing herself to her peers so specifically. And then we also get that she's from Greece and now is in Wisconsin. And of course the accent is the main focus in this description, right? We see that she's actively learning to change her accent. So we get some of that insecurity, we get some of that othering happening here, and it's a little bit more of what's driving her, it's driving her motivations, it's driving her character through the story. If you wanted to make this a little bit longer and put in some more of those details from the first section, we can still do that. So let me rewrite this in another way that I think would flow a little bit better, be a little bit easier to read for your readers. Okay, so this one reads, Amelia wakes up late every day, so she skips breakfast to have time to do her makeup. The bags under her eyes never quite disappear, but maybe if she started going to bed earlier, they'd fade. She uses a foundation shade a little lighter than she did back home, but the girls still compliment her tan every so often. She's proud of her long, thick hair that the other girls envy. Amelia's mother always kept her hair long, so Amelia does too. She's the tallest of the girls in her class, but what really makes Amelia stand out is the Greek accent she brought with her to Wisconsin. So we still get those 4 main points, right? We understand that she's a girl, we see that she's from Greece and now is in Wisconsin, and we see her Greek accent too. But what I've done here is weave some of those details into some of the action that's going on, some things that she might be doing, so that it's not just a dump of exposition, right? So learning that Amelia wakes up late, but she still does her makeup every day and chooses to skip breakfast, I think says a lot about Amelia. I think whether you would choose to skip breakfast or skip your makeup says a lot about you. And we see that her foundation is lighter than it was back home, so maybe she's trying to lighten her skin to blend in with the girls at school a little bit more. So we are still getting that sense of her insecurity. We're still seeing that she sees herself as different from the rest of her peers. But with the hair, we get to see that she's got this long, thick hair, but she's so proud of it. So I think it's okay to point it out more directly in this sense. And we see that it's modeling after her mom. So I think that gives it a little bit of a backstory that's entertaining and kind of a cute little story for a young girl to be so invested in what her mom looks like that she's copying it as well. And then again, we see that she's insecure and she feels like she stands out a lot because of her height and her accent, which is from the original piece as well. So there are a lot of ways that you can weave these things into your narrative rather than just dumping information on your reader. I think this is a more enjoyable reading process, and it just helps your reader understand a little bit more about these characters because we're going deeper than just the surface level, what do they look like. If you're looking for more ways to develop characters, you gotta check out these videos on the screen here, and I also have a character profile training that you can find in the description of this video. It's totally free and it walks you through how to fill out a character profile, how to use it in your story by either crafting a character arc or plotting a story based off of the information in the profile. But otherwise, I'll see you next week, and until then, happy writing.